Let's get jiggy with it. Welcome back to the Analog Sticks podcast, where this week we're diving back in time to the N64 era to cover one of the few gems on the console in Banjo-Kazooie. Let's go!
Let's go!
Alright, welcome back on into the Analog Sticks podcast. If you're a returning listener, thank you very much. We appreciate it, and appreciate all the feedback we got on our last episode. You guys really showed out, especially on the YouTube portion. So if that's you, shout-outs to you.
Yeah, that was so fun being able to go through the comments and, see people talk about their own experiences with the game.
It was really nice. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I tried to reply to as many as I could. If I didn't have anything to really say, I didn't, then I'm sorry, but I at least tried to throw you the heart or a like or something like that. But either way, we appreciate you. And if you're a new listener, we also appreciate you, just in a little different way, because you haven't listened to the other ones yet, so go back and do it after this. But anyways, welcome on in. My name is Rusty. I'm your host, joined by Cody, your other host.
What's
Cody,
up?
How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. Man, what did I do today? I went and got some milkshakes.
Dude, milkshakes are good.
Oh, yeah. I didn't get one, though. Everyone else did.
Oh, that's so sad. I had a milkshake last night made from home with your Homeland's ice cream, Tillamook brand.
Oh, dude. That reminds me, you were telling me earlier, apparently we've got a listener in Oregon who went through and listened to all of our episodes. I'm from Oregon. That is my home state, most beautiful place in the world. So shout out to you, Mr. Oregon Man. We really appreciate you going back through the episodes.
Yeah, good job, Mr. Oregon Man. But I did enjoy some Tillamook ice cream. I had chocolate chip cookie dough.
I gotta say, I said Oregon Man or woman. Either one.
I think the analytics say our audience is 100% male.
Well, there we go.
Either way, whoever you are, we appreciate you. Welcome on in. Like I was saying, though, I was enjoying my Tillamook ice cream. I've had a little bit of a throat thing. Like, I feel fine. It just hurts to swallow right now. Mm-hmm. Right now, we've got some Bud Lights. It's a Saturday night, so we're letting loose a little bit, having some fun.
Oh,
and
yeah.
This show is brought to you by Bud Light. Just kidding, but please sponsor us. Your beer is like the only one I drink.
I'll be honest, I don't like beer that much, but I love drinking it with people. So, sorry, audience, I'm going to keep making faces when I drink this. Of course, you're not going to see that part, so no worries.
Not until we get a nice camera and can do video podcasts.
Hey.
But yeah, so I had my ice cream to try to soothe my throat. Didn't work, so my throat just hurts, but I have an excuse to eat ice cream, so I'll take that, especially when I'm in the middle of a diet. It's nice.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, other than not getting a milkshake, what have you been up to this week?
I fixed my 3D printer. I think I mentioned it in one of the earlier episodes. I broke it. Well, it's all fixed now, and I've been going back to printing more things. It's been a lot of fun. And then I have classes in 2 weeks.
Fun stuff. Help fund Cody's education. You can check out our Patreon. It's going to be linked in the description of the bio. So yeah, plug that. Without any further delays, I think we should go ahead and get into this one.
Oh, yeah.
Banjo-Kazooie. Cody, what's your first thing that comes to mind when you think Banjo-Kazooie?
My older brother.
Your older brother.
Yep. So when I was growing up, I had the GameCube. My brother had the Nintendo 64. That was his. And so anytime I watched him play a game, for a long time, it was Banjo-Kazooie. So anytime I play that game, I just think of when I was little, watching him play it.
Dude, that's awesome. I was the oldest child, so I went from GameCube on. As a matter of fact, I used to have every console from the GameCube on sitting on my desk, but the Wii's in the living room now because I have it homebrewed and I can play all sorts of stuff on it. Mm-hmm. So I just have the GameCube, the Wii U, and where's my Switch? It was on my desk earlier, but it's portable, so it's not here. But yeah, so I never had any experiences with this, and this week was actually my first time playing this game. And before we get into the story, I want to get a couple things off my chest here, some just thoughts and impressions. I came in with very low expectations. Mm-hmm. I'm one of those people. I can appreciate Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, Super Mario 64, but I wouldn't say I enjoy those games. I'd say they're fine experiences, but nothing I'm like aching to go back to all the time like I would with most GameCube era games. I don't know if that's nostalgia or just the fact that I think they are overall more well made because the hardware advanced so quickly. But I had low expectations, and when I came into this game, aside from some of the typical N64 clunk, I really came to enjoy it, and I think this is a game I could see myself coming back to. Even if it's not this one, I would like to dabble in the sequels at some time.
To me, it is a capital V video game. Something about it as a game is just perfect to me.
It feels like a historic point in the history of video games.
Mm-hmm. It's a lot like Mario 64, but in some ways, I think they improved upon that formula.
Yeah, they improved upon a few things. There's a couple of things I didn't like. We'll get into the gripes as well. Overall, I'd say I had a really good experience with it. But it stands on its own aside from Mario 64. It's not like it's climbing on top of it and sitting on its shoulders. This is a very separate experience that builds on a lot of the concepts we saw, but definitely stands on its own. And I have come to enjoy it.
I think for a lot of people, this would have been their first main Nintendo game.
Maybe even their first non-2D game. I mean, if you had an N64, odds are you had another 3D game. But I
you
mean,
had
whether
Mario
it was,
64 then.
yeah, and Ocarina of Time had been out. I mean, other than that, what were you playing? Superman 64? And based on some of the flight sections we'll get to in a little bit, I could not imagine that's a fun time.
Oh, there's a shocking amount of just random games tied to like movies or TV shows, or even just their own little titles that maybe didn't sell much, but there's plenty of shovelware to be found with these older games.
Yeah, I mean, this game, while its game total, this console, while its game total is small in quantity, there is still a lot of garbage on it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's stuff like GoldenEye that stands out. That's like the first real good license. There were probably a couple on the end.
And that was also Rareware.
It
Same
was,
guys
you're
who
right.
made Banjo-Kazooie.
Yeah, I think we want to cover Conker's Bad Fur Day soon. That's another Rareware game. And now that I've played a Rareware game, I'm more excited for it.
Rareware.
That's fun to say.
Rareware.
Rareware.
Great content.
Grand old time. Without any more delays, though, let's go ahead and get into this burn. And with the throat thing, cut me some slack. There might be a couple gaps where I stop to swallow and enjoy the pain for a moment. But let's go ahead and get into this one. Nothing better than a witch's brew first thing in the morning, but Grunty's stirring up some trouble as well as her potion. Her skin isn't the only thing that's green, though, as her envy lands her in the role opposite Liam Neeson in Taken 4. Meanwhile, our sister seems ready to enjoy a day chilling with the fam, but Banjo seems a little out of tune as he can't get out of bed. After our sister fights for her right to party, she gets snatched by the old hag, and now, much like a grade school band, the Banjo and Kazooie are ready to make some noise. After trekking up the screwy mountain, we must work through the witch's lair. After a party house and a hut, plundering local shores, saying Domo Arigato, Sharky Roboto, checking in with Gator McCluskey, trudging beyond the North Wall, going out on a Rich O'Connell-esque expedition, playing with the Poltergust 3000, helping out Captain Phillips, and chilling like a bee in a tree, we take out the evil hag, play a board game, and save our sister.
Yeah.
I'm blaming all the flaws and things I had to edit out on the throat. Otherwise, I think that was a great burn.
I hope the final product is just cut everywhere.
Oh, it's going to sound so spliced. I hope it doesn't. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed my burn. That's essentially the story. I took some creative liberties. But that's essentially the story. It's a fun one. Would you like to take us from the start here?
Yeah, I can start us out. So here's our a little more detailed run through of the story. You start out with a scene on Gruntilda, the witch that's going to be your adversary for the rest of the game.
I'd imagine we're just going to call her Grunty for short. The game
Grunty.
does that most of the time, and it's a lot easier to say.
She's doing that magic mirror thing with her cauldron. She's like, who's the prettiest one of them all?
She's not like, who's the prettiest girl of them all? She's like...
Yeah.
We'll get into the dialogue a little later.
And the pot tells her that it is not her, it's in fact Tootie.
And Tootie, who happens to be our sister, is just running up towards Spiral Mountain to her house because she wants to go on an adventure with her brother.
That's right. You know what? She did end up going on an adventure, just not with her brother.
As a matter of fact, she eventually says she's had enough adventuring for one day, but we'll get to that towards the end. Because back on Spiral Mountain, she's waiting for you to wake up so you can go on said adventure. But then, you know, your typical video game trope, Banjo just doesn't want to wake up. Because Dewey's there like, hey, it's time to wake up. And Banjo's just like... snoring his day away.
If my hero in a video game is not trying to sleep in, I just can't relate, you know?
I mean, that's why every Zelda game's so good. Yeah, but then the old hag comes and tries to take away your sister. they don't show you the scene in which this happens. They just show Grunty leaving the lair, and then it cuts to Banjo's room, and there's the typical like comic book-esque animation: bang, clash, thud, and you can hear a bunch of stuff where it sounds like Tootie's putting up a damn good fight to try to not get captured, but eventually she does get snagged, and you head outside to meet Bottles the Mole,
who was witness to this event.
He just stood there and watched, didn't do anything about it, probably because he can't see very well, but fun stuff. Bottles the Mole, he acts as a tutorial. One thing I was really surprised by, especially because this is an N64 game, you can essentially skip the tutorial. I did not because I hadn't played it before, but you can skip the tutorial. That's cool.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, you can tell him, no, I don't need your help, and then just go straight to the lair. So that's cool. But then you do go through there, you can learn all the moves, we'll get into the moveset here in a second, and then you go into Grunty's lair, and kind of like Mario 64 or any of these other big sandbox games, there's a whole bunch of sandboxes you find in the hub world. And the way you do this is by placing the pieces, the puzzle pieces, the jiggies, that act the same way stars would. And it's a very different mechanic. It behaves differently. We'll cover that in a little bit here. But you go in each of the worlds, collect the jiggies, and leave to eventually go save your sister. At the top of the tower, there's a big board game that Grunty thinks she's going to use to kill you.
Yes.
You succeed, and you can rescue... Well, you get to choose from 3 prizes. It's like a Grunty plushie. I think the other one's like a toilet or something. And then your sister. And Kazooie's like, I don't know, that doll looks kind of nice, but you end up saving your sister, and then you head up to the very top of the tower, and you face off against Gruntilda, and you end up saving your sister. That's really all there is to this story. It's pretty simple, but good enough to get by.
Yeah, it's the story doesn't need to be anything crazy. It's all about the gameplay for this.
Oh, there's also an ending cutscene I would like to cover before we get too far into this. After you've beaten the game, you not Kazooie, not Kazooie. Kazooie's still with you.
Is this the end cutscene?
Yeah, there are a couple end cutscenes. There's the one with Tootie, where they go through all the characters and stuff. But this is after Grunty falls off the mountain. She gets knocked off. We'll get into the fight in more details and how that happens. A rock falls on top of her, and then it cuts to Banjo and Kazooie, Tootie, and Bottles the Mole sitting on a beach enjoying some fruits. And there is a human in a bikini, human woman in a bikini, walking around like serving them.
Which is an amazing award for any preteen boy playing this game.
It kind of took me back a little bit. I'm like, why is there this is the only like normal-ish human. She has super long legs. I guess she's supposed to be like a pinup or something.
And she's serving watermelons very...
near her breast.
Yeah. Very suggestively.
Captain Blubber goes by. It's a nice thing. Mumbo falls out of the tree, and he shows you all the stuff you missed. And then it's like, then it shows one of Grunty's minions trying to free her from the rock, and it says, "Oh, the end."
Yeah.
That's your story. Plain and simple. Nothing crazy there. It's a fine enough story, but it's pretty simple. Even more simple than Metroid, I say, just because there's not as much lore behind it. I could be wrong, but as far as I can tell, there's not that much lore. It's just...
No. Banjo-Kazooie lore?
Yeah, she was jealous that your sister's prettier than her, kidnapped her, you saved her. GG's.
I always forget that this happens, but the first time I saved, it does that cutscene where the witch actually swaps Beauty with Tootie.
I don't think I ever saw that. I was playing on NSO, the expansion pass, and I was just using save states. I don't think I ever actually saw that.
So when you physically save the game, it really ups the stakes in a way that a lot of video games, I don't think, ever have. In that it shows the witch actually swapping her beauty with Tootie, and she comes out as this beautiful witch, and then Tootie is this gross gorilla monkey thing.
Oh, no.
And then she's like, you better... I don't remember what the message was. It's something about, you better do this quick. Why are you hopping off now,
Yeah, no, they show them getting in the chambers when you first go into Grunty's lair, but they don't show it actually happening. And then at the end, when I saw her in the furnace, I'm kind of like, but weren't they in the chamber switching beauty or whatever? But I don't know.
I wonder if you get anything different when you beat the game without ever saving it.
I didn't see anything like that ever. I'm going to Google this cutscene because I want to watch it real quick.
Sure.
But in the meantime, we're going to go ahead and dive into the moveset and the gameplay. The moveset is surprisingly robust compared to what I was expecting. I don't know what I was expecting, but I wasn't expecting this. So Bottles the Mole teaches you all these moves you can find throughout. Cody's going to go ahead and lead us into that.
Yeah, there are so many different moves that you can do in the game. It's a lot like Metroid, where you just keep building up all these moves and skills.
Until about halfway through, and then it just kind of stops.
Yeah. But the game does a great job, especially as a game accessible to young kids, where the moves are slowly built out and clearly explained. So, if you had all these movesets right from the get-go, it'd be overwhelming. But getting them one move at a time through a few different levels really makes it easier to pick up on.
Yeah, I can't find the scene, so we're just gonna move on. But yeah, no, it's really nice to have all these moves at your disposal, and it controls really well. Although I do feel that there were a few that I just like never used. I don't know, but I mean, I'll just kind of go on list it. Obviously, the movement's pretty simple. It's N64, so you have your camera control buttons, which I mean, if you're playing on a newer console, you'll just get the sticks, but it clicks a set amount in either direction when you click the button, and you have like one up and one down you can do to make it farther out or closer up.
I would always set it to the farthest out option.
Always. Yeah. It's like Mario Cam in Mario 64. Nobody ever actually uses it unless you're trying to look for something higher up.
I had a way easier time with this camera than I did with Billy Hatcher.
The Billy Hatcher camera, they did it right, just bad.
Yes.
So it doesn't work.
It was too close to being good, and that's what made it so bad.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. But yeah, you have your camera controls. You obviously have a jump. You don't get the run until a little later. I'll touch on that. But you can run around and jump, and that's basically it to start. But then as you start to talk to Bottles the Mole on Spiral Mountain before heading to the mountain, if you did not skip the tutorial, there's a few different moves you can pick up. When you press B while standing still or moving slowly, you do the claw swipe, which is where Banjo walks forward, flailing his arms. It works pretty well. That's like your melee attack there. You can you press B while moving to forward roll, and that was like my most used move until I realized how bad it was. When you press B mid-air, you do the rat-a-tat, and that's when Kazooie just pecks forward 3 times. That one deals a good bit of damage.
That was my main move.
It switched that way for me halfway through. When you press A mid-air, you get the feathery flap, which kind of serves as like a weak double jump. It gets you more distance, but no more height. It works.
I spent a lot of time just trying to get to places I couldn't with the with the double jump.
Yeah, I mean, with save states, you can kind of abuse that, which was nice on NSO.
That's the weird thing. For some reason, when I was playing this, even though I had access to the save states, I never used it. For some reason, it's like, because it's 3D, I just forget that I can do that.
I used it a few times, mostly just when I'd start a level or like start a challenge, just so I didn't have to go through the text again if I failed.
Yeah.
Or if I was about to do something, I'm like, I don't know if this is intended, but I'm going to try it and see what happens.
That's one thing. In terms of how long it takes to get through the game, and I think this happens a lot with these earlier games, it's just kind of a slog to get through all the dialogue and all the getting through the hub world to get to the world you want to play, and then actually starting. It can be 5 or 6 minutes, from boot up to getting into the zone.
And we're going to get into the dialogue and world design in more detail here in a little bit. We're going to get through the moveset. But yeah, I agree entirely with what you're saying. I think Mario 64 has a much better, more tight hub world that it's less like trying to find the levels and more just playing them, which I think I like more. I could see the value in this form, but I'm not a fan. Back to the moveset, though, you have Z to crouch and a few moves that feed off of that. While crouched, if you press A, you do the flap flip, which is like an SM64 backflip.
It's a good backflip.
It is. You can move in any direction. You can do a forwards backflip. It's pretty cool. And it works really well. Gets you a little bit more height than your normal jump, and even the double jump does. And then if you press B while you're crouched, you do the beak barge. I love how they're all named creatively. I haven't said that yet, but every move is creatively named, and it's pretty cool. But when you do the beak barge, you lunge forward with Kazooie, and you, break stuff. The tutorial, they let you break big rocks, and it feels really empowering. I love that. You can climb trees but just by jumping onto them and holding up or down. It's really nifty in a couple places. You can swim. I wasn't a big fan of the swimming at first. Eventually, I did get the hang of it a little bit more when I found out that you can hold A or B to do swimming.
It took me a while, too. Once I realized, though, that just turning has its own kind of momentum. So, you can turn to hit something, but once you go forward, you might have turned too much.
Yes.
Once I picked up on that, though, then, you just move around however you want.
My first reaction, it reminded me a little bit of swimming with Skyward Sword and trying to use the Wiimote. I don't know if you're familiar with that game, but the swimming in that game is just not fun.
I skipped that one.
Yeah, I can't say I blame you. We'll go back and cover it eventually. We're going to wait and save most of the Zelda games for when we have a little bit of a bigger audience because they're really good for the algorithms. But
and we could gush over any Zelda game for a couple hours.
I haven't even told you this. I have an idea. We're just going to do a 3-hour Wind Waker special one day and
definitely
just goon over the game for 3 hours.
Yeah, that's unfortunately for you guys, we're at just the right age where Wind Waker is peak nostalgia. So we can talk about that all
peak
day.
nostalgia, and I also just think it's a damn good design game. I see its flaws. I refuse to acknowledge them. I love that game. In this moveset, though, we keep digressing, but I think it's okay. I was talking about the swimming. You can hold A while you're swimming to kind of like kick as Banjo, but then if you hold B, that's how you breach underwater as well. And you can kind of do that underwater, and Kazooie flaps, and you like go faster, basically. When I found that out, I'm like, oh, that's really useful. I wish they told you that up front, but they don't. They just tell you A. They tell you B to go under and then A to swim after that.
I wonder if that's another situation where having a manual with you would help.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. And they should really put the manuals in NSO. And now we're going to start getting into some of the moves you learn throughout, because that's all Bottles tells you on Spiral Mountain. The first thing I learned after this was the Talon Trot, which is so nice. I just wish the sound effect was better, but we're going to get to sound effects later. I was playing this in bed while my fiance was trying to sleep. And of course I had the sound on because I'm trying to like listen to the music and stuff. And she's like, oh my God, that sounds like you're pulling the straw in and out of a McDonald's cup. Like the
Oh, your poor fiance.
She was not happy with me. I turned off the sound, and I missed some of the sound in Freeze Easy Beak, but that's okay.
No.
Anyways, you press C left while you're crouched, and you hop on Kazooie's back, which looks kind of doofy, but it makes you run faster. That's basically the main way you move around for most of this, I would say. That was what I found, at least. If you press Z mid-air, you do the Beak Buster, which is just a ground pound. It's heavily utilized, and I like it. Then there's the eggs. When you press C up while crouched, you shoot an egg forward. When you press C down while crouched, you toss an egg backwards, and it makes a little farting noise, and it's weird.
They even comment about that in the game when Bottles is telling you how to shoot the eggs. He's like, and if you go the other direction, it'll come out the other end. And Kazooie's like, wait a second.
Because it's Kazooie spinning the eggs, or essentially laying them. But when you do it backwards, they like bounce around a little bit.
Laying them with quite some force.
Oh, yeah, enough to where they're bouncing around repeatedly at the same height.
I also love that these are eggs I presume he's eaten.
Yeah, you picked them up in the levels. It's a fun concept. They're happily utilized throughout the game in many places. You use them to feed things, to fill up things, to put in things. You basically use them.
Final boss too.
You do use them a lot in the final boss. You can use them in combat, but it's like not rewarding. It's the same concept as using tight circles in Billy Hatcher or tossing your egg forward. So that
doesn't
fun.
happen.
Yeah, I mean you can, but you don't. And then there's also the shock spring platforms, which are little green circles on the ground. If you press A, you do a high jump that's even higher than your backflip. But you can only do it in set locations, and it kind of feels shoehorned in. Like they could just put a ladder anywhere they put this, but it's neat. It is a little janky to use at times as well.
It's a video game thing.
Yeah, I mean, the way it works also is you do like a little hop beforehand, and you can go ahead and start moving in the direction you want to go before you do the big jump. And I mean, it works. It feels good to control, but at the same time, like I was saying, it kind of feels shoehorned in. And then naturally there's flying, and much like the swimming, I wasn't a huge fan of this. What are your thoughts on the flight? Shrug.
Yeah, big shrug for those who couldn't see it. I flew. It wasn't, I didn't feel like I was flying.
Yeah, my biggest gripe with this is the way the camera works. It's always stuck directly behind you. I wish I could turn the camera and then turn Banjo, but the C buttons do nothing while you're flying. And it just kind of feels clunky.
Because on the N64, using the C-stick didn't quite work.
Yeah, well, I mean, they had the buttons, but, you know. Not a fan. Anyways, that happens. You use the red feathers you find, much like the eggs throughout the levels, to increase height. And later there's another move, the Beak Bomb, where you press B while flying to, like, dart towards something out of the air and, like, dive bomb it or whatever. And that works well. I will say, you just line up your shot and press A.
Nice.
If they're in the center of the screen, you hit B. You go to the center of the screen because your camera's always right behind you. Um,
Yeah.
I wasn't a big fan of the flying sections, especially because you can't do like tight circles or anything. It's always these big loopy circles, and there's some where it's like you have to fly through this thing 3 times in this X amount of time, and it's just like that's not fun. Like I don't enjoy this, but the flying is there.
Well, because flying is this is a this is a collectathon platforming game. Flying isn't really platforming.
Yeah, and like there's some stuff where it's like clearly you're supposed to just use the flying pad. You can only fly from set locations as well. I don't think I mentioned that. You're clearly supposed to use it just go do one thing. But what I found myself doing often was I would fly up to the highest point in the level and just get whatever was up there. And a lot of times they would have like a jiggy at the top of the level, so you could just go get that one. And that kind of felt a little lame at times. But all in all, I'd say the flying was unnecessary, but I'm not like super out on it. I just think it could have been better executed and more well implemented, like a Spyro game, for instance.
You know what game did implement it better? And I'm amazed I haven't brought it up yet. Ukulele.
I do want to play that as well.
You got to play that.
We
Shout out to
have
the
mentioned
audience.
Ukulele once already. We're going to get to it probably a couple months.
I'll say it at the end too. If you're interested in Banjo-Kazooie and you've never played it, I would highly suggest Ukulele because it's almost the same game with a different skin,
The same
made
thing,
by the
but
same
different.
team, but it's modern and it has good camera controls.
Love good camera controls. Love some good camera controls. Finishing up the movesets, though, there's only a couple more. When you press Z up while crouching, you use the Wonder Wing, which plays some really cool music I enjoy. It's banjo music, of course. And Kazooie basically folds his wings over you and consumes the yellow feathers, and you're invincible for X amount of time. It works. And then you get the wading boots, as well as the Turbo Talon Trot, which are just boots you find in the stages that you pick up. And the wading boots let you walk through hazardous fluids, I guess, like quicksand or cold water or poison swamp water. And the turbo boots are basically running shoes that let you zoom. But it's a set amount of time, and each drop of the boots has a different set amount of time. Like there's one challenge where you have the Turbo Talon Trot for like a full minute, but there's some other stuff where it's like you basically have just enough to get across this little stream, and as soon as you get to the other end, they're off.
Yep.
So I mean that works, but also the same thing. It kind of feels a little shoehorned. I wish there was just like an item for it, but there aren't items in this game, obviously, where you can just equip it. It works, and I already covered the beak bomb, so that's really it for the moveset. Do you have any other thoughts on the overall just gameplay or how the game feels?
The game feels great overall.
Yeah, you can go ahead.
What's great to me is the fact that I never, even with Metroid, it took me a bit to get used to it, you know? But with Banjo-Kazooie, you start getting into it, and you're already running around using all the moves, getting where you want to go without too much frustration.
I will say, yeah, it feels like it controls really well. I have my gripes with the swimming and the flying, but all in all, the movement feels satisfying. Not quite that Mario level where it's fun to just get in and run and jump around and do your dives and all that. But it feels good to move around in the same way that Metroid did, but without that having to get used to the controls. It's a 3D platformer, and everything controls exactly the way you would hope it does, and I love it. Less the swimming and the flying, of course. I have my gripes with those, but
It was a little awkward, too, with the way it was like one boost, and then wait, another boost, and then you turn wherever with the swimming. That's a little awkward to me.
yeah, I mean, I could complain about that, but I don't want to seem like I'm coming off too negative with this game, as I really did enjoy it. It's just those two things kind of drove me a little nutty, but it does feel good to move around. I mean, Banjo controls really well, Kazooie controls really well, and the level design really plays to it. I mean, we're going to get into the worlds here in just another second, but I mean, just running around feels good. It doesn't feel awkward at all.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the overall controls in the story of the game are just very, very small parts of what makes it so great.
Even the camera feels okay. I mean, it's still N64, very, very early camera, but for the time, I think it works wonderfully. It does once you get used to it, that's the only thing that really takes some time to get used to. It does like the set clicks, and you kind of can anticipate where the camera is going to be when you click the stick in either direction or press the C buttons.
This game does a great job at knowing when to give camera controls to the player and when to fix the camera where the game wants it to be.
Except for a couple times where it doesn't. There are some times, I can think of one in Freeze Easy Peak, where you're walking on a ledge and halfway through the camera flips 180, like with no notice, and just all of a sudden you're walking the other way. It does that a couple other times throughout, and I mean, it wasn't ever too obnoxious. It was just kind of like, oh, that's something I'm going to point out, because I knew I was taking notes. But other than that, everything works really well, and the levels, like I was saying, are designed to feed into it. The first one we have is Spiral Mountain. Serves as the tutorial. It's kind of like, I wouldn't even say this is the Green Hill Zone. This is just straight up a tutorial. It's well designed. You have any comments on the looks or graphics of the area?
It's iconic. When I think of Banjo-Kazooie, I'm really just thinking of Spiral Mountain.
And it's funny because you don't even spend that much time there, like, at all.
Now you don't, but when you're like 5 or 6, you do.
Oh, well, yeah, I guess you're right. I mean, isn't Spiral Mountain the Smash stage they put in when they added Banjo-Kazooie?
Oh, is it?
I think
haven't
so.
Played Smash in a long time.
Let's confirm this. We might be playing Smash tonight after this. That's going to be fun. Banjo-Kazooie Smash stage. Spiral Mountain. It is indeed Spiral Mountain. It plays okay in Smash. But in this game, it works really well. And like we were just talking about with the camera, when you're going up the incline screw platform, the camera is fixed and it follows you around and it works really well. There are a couple other places where it doesn't. But yeah, it's just a really fun first area to move around and get used to the controls. Bottles teaches you the moves, but again, you can skip the whole tutorial if you want and just go straight to the layer, which I really enjoyed because I started playing on an emulator and then decided, I got NSO, let's go ahead and do it like that. And then that time I skipped it, and it was like 3 minutes, and you're in Grunty's lair. There are a lot of honeycomb pieces. I think you can get a full extra piece of health. I didn't even touch on the honeycomb pieces yet, but if you find these honeycomb pieces hidden throughout the worlds, you get extra honeycombs, which act as your health. I think you start out with like 4, and you can get up to like 8 or something like that.
Do you have a written out list of all the different types of collectibles?
No, I don't, but we can go ahead and get in those before we get any farther into the world.
Yeah, should we talk about those? That's the biggest thing about this game. It's a collectathon.
It is indeed a collectathon. And
not just a collectathon. This is the collectathon.
I was about to say the same thing. You took the words out of my mouth. But there are a few different things you collect. Each of these worlds we're about to go through, there are 10 Jiggies, is that correct?
Per world?
Yes, I believe so. Yep. So there's 10 Jiggies, which are the SM64 stars.
And then are there 10 Jiggies in the hub world?
In Grunty's lair, yes. Yeah. But you have to activate those through the witch switches, which are also hidden in every world. And then they unlock the Jiggies in Grunty's lair. There are the Mumbo tokens, and I think that there are varying amounts in each one. But you find these Mumbo tokens that are just like silver skulls, and they allow you to do Mumbo transformations. We'll touch on each one. Yeah, go ahead and do that again.
Bokum.
I think so. I don't know. I'm not. My throat hurts too much.
Ikum bokum.
Yeah, that's Mumbo for you. My throat hurts too much to try an impression right now. But yeah, you do those, and those unlock your transformations that Mumbo can perform. He's like a witch doctor shaman thing. Then there are the music notes. You need, I think, like
100 per stage.
There are 100 in each stage. I know you don't need all of them. You don't need 900 or whatever it is. I think you only need like 780 or something like that.
Let's be real. This is Banjo-Kazooie. You need every item.
Oh, yeah, no, I got all the music notes in every stage I played. And they weren't too hard to come by either, I would say. Like, there were a couple times where I'm like, where haven't I been? Where could I have left notes? But it was usually like 1 or 2.
I definitely had moments where I'd be at the end of a stage, and then I would only have 3 or 4 left. And so I'm running around thinking, okay, there's got to be one little secret or cove I've missed.
And there are these sandboxes that are so well designed that you really get a feel for the area, and you can remember where you've been and where you haven't, because the areas stand out. They're very well designed. I'm like blown away with these levels.
Although there's a couple spots where I had a hard time finding notes. I even had to look up where one was, just because of the geometry of the world and the camera. Sometimes they're in spots that are really easy to run by and then never realize that you've run by.
For instance, there are a couple of mazes they just hid the notes in, and that drove me kind of nuts.
Well, there is all the hillsides on Mumbo's Mountain, the first level. There's a couple that are kind of in these little coves, and I just maybe it's revealing something bad about how I couldn't find it, but I just could not find it.
I didn't have any issues, but what I did notice was the render distance on them isn't all that great at times. So if you have a big overview, you're not going to see them until you get close, which was kind of a drawback. But that's just N64 limitations. Obviously, we both played the N64 version. We didn't play the Xbox version, right? Yeah. So we had to deal with that a little bit. But I mean, I'm not going to fault the game for literal just hardware restrictions.
Yeah, I refuse to play Microsoft's bastard child, Banjo-Kazooie.
It's just a money whore. As far as other collectibles go, you can only hold 100 eggs at a time. We touched on the egg mechanics. 50 of the red feathers to fly and increase your height or do the beak bomb. And then 10 of the gold feathers. But they're littered all throughout the worlds.
Yep.
Am I missing anything? There's the honeycomb pieces. I touched on those. I think there's 2 hidden in each world outside of Spiral
What are the
Mountain.
names of the little creatures?
Jingos.
Jingos?
Jingos. I think they're Jingos. Yeah.
Jinjos. I think 2 J's.
Yeah, Jinjos. You're right.
Yeah, you find those guys. They're
They make
important
fun
later
noises. Yeah, they're a little important. We'll get to that towards the end of the episode if you guys are willing to stick around. Which, speaking of, if you're still watching at this point and you're not subscribed or followed or rated or reviewed or liked, do that.
Oh, please do. Right now, with how small this channel is and how we're just starting out, subscribing to us is more impactful than any other subscription you could make. And that's not me trying to get you to just subscribe. That's just a fact.
It really would be appreciated. We're getting plenty of watch hours, and we appreciate you guys watching all the way through, but just hit the button.
It's fun. It's so weird seeing that people are actually watching it. It's like, oh, shoot, can we make this, like a little community? I'm excited to get you guys more involved and to make this, a real thing.
Yeah, and if you haven't already, check out the Twitter. I'm working on it. Just basically replying to, I'm retweeting Nintendo stuff and other gaming news as it comes out, and I'll interact and whatnot. Fun stuff. And, I mean, Cody's Twitter exists, but I don't think he ever checks it.
No. Join our Twitter. No politics on that page.
Yeah, unless you want to learn about the politics of Nintendo and Reggie Fils-Aimé's new book. Anyways, yeah. Thanks for subscribing now that you've clearly done it. We're going to go ahead and jump into these worlds now that we've covered all those. The Jingos, like we were saying, I'll round off that before we move forward. I think there's 5 or 6 in every world. They each have a different color. And when you find them, they give you a Jiggy. You find all of them, you get a Jiggy. So that's nice. And they're never too difficult to find. They whistle at you if you're in their proximity. So it's never like, if you're near them, you're going to be like, oh, there's one right here. And you got to be kind of close. And they're in areas you're meant to go to as well. So.
And then there are some collectibles that are world specific, but I don't think that's worth listing out.
I can't think of any off the top. I know that there are some I can
Bits
picture.
Of treasure.
Them. Yeah.
For the for treasure trove.
Yeah, some certain stuff you need to get for certain Jiggies throughout the game. But now we can go ahead and get into the actual worlds. First things first, we want to touch on the hub world, Gruntilda's Lair. I think it's okay as a hub world. I wish that they wouldn't have tried to make it as much of a true level as they did and just left it as a hub world.
Yeah.
I can see the value of what they were trying to do, but I would rather just have a big final level of Gruntilda's Lair with callbacks to the things you've done before, rather than a hub world with a bunch of enemies that more and more appear throughout the game. And it's difficult to find where the levels are at times. Not too difficult, I was never stuck trying to find a level, but it is a little labyrinthian at times until you get the hang of it. And
yeah, that's another that's one gripe I also had with this game and Ukulele, and I assume it's just for all the Banjo-Kazooie type games. I think it's fun having in hub world that's kind of like this overworld that's its own level, but there's times where you're just trying to get to a level and there might be a platform you have to wait for, or you have to try to go somewhere, and if you fail you have to go way back. Moments like that just aren't fun because you're just backtracking trying to get somewhere. Yeah,
I didn't like the having to go back down to place Jiggy pieces, because that's how you unlock each of the levels. You take your Jiggy pieces and place them in the picture, and then in a completely different location it opens a door to get into a level. It works. I just wish they could have made it its own level. I think that would have been really good, but they didn't. They made it a hub world, and I would have just liked a simple hub world.
I feel like hub worlds were... It's another thing that was just super big at the time. It was a great way to have access to these different levels and have it be in a way where kids could understand it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, it was super in at the time to have your level selection be like a part of the game.
Yeah, and I mean, I enjoy a good hub world. Like, Delfino Square in Mario Sunshine is one of my favorite areas in all of gaming. Just because it's fun to play around in, and it's never like... And there's, like, puzzles to get to the levels, but it's never like... I have to really think. It's like, oh, you got a new ability, you can go use it on this thing we're showing you right now.
You know what's the big difference between Gruntiddle's lair? Gruntiddle's lair?
She'll tittle your tittle.
The big difference between Gruntilda's lair and a place like Delfino Plaza is with Gruntilda's lair, if you want to go to a different level, you're going to have to go through these obstacles or through all these doors to get there. With Delfino Plaza, almost all the levels, you can just walk to them. I mean, there's stuff to do, but it's all on the side. It's not in between you and the level.
And you can get to any level from the start in, like, less than a minute, which is awesome. And this, sometimes it does take a little bit to find the levels. And some of the platforming to get to these levels is genuinely a little bit challenging just due to the restrictions of camera controls and whatnot. Also, we're playing on NSO. We don't have a notched controller. So me holding up, I might slightly veer to the left or right and fall off a thin ledge.
I didn't even think about that. That does make it more difficult.
Yeah, I wasn't about to spring for that spicy N64 Switch controller, so I have no notches.
You know, I wanted to bring up earlier, and there wasn't a chance to bring it around. Those N64 controllers are wacky. And when I grew up, I had always thought that they were wacky because it was one of the first 3D consoles, so they just didn't know how to do it. But now that we've seen more of Nintendo's history, I think it was just a Nintendo console. You know, they always try to have some kind of wacky gimmick to it, except for the GameCube controller.
They did have a little, like, the analog triggers were quote unquote gimmicky at the time. Not necessarily a gimmick, but they were different, and I love them so much. The noises are so satisfying. I honestly thought about grabbing my GameCube controller just to make notch noises and clicking, but
the GameCube controller can that be its own episode one day?
Oh, we'll just cover a mini episode on a GameCube controller.
It's just gonna be a controller.
It's just gonna be an hour of us making noises with the GameCube controller.
Oh my gosh, ASMR!
If you want the GameCube controller ASMR episode, let us know in the comments of an episode. It doesn't even have to be this one. Fun stuff. But with the N64 controller, I think what they were trying to do was kind of like ease people into the idea of needing an analog stick. Shout out the podcast.
I'm trying to remember. I remember you can find all kinds of little documentaries about Nintendo employees talking about how they designed the controller. And if I remember right, it's because they wanted to put the stick on its own handle because that was like a different mode. You know, you had... If you were holding the left and right, it felt a lot like an SNES. You had all your buttons.
Yeah, you had your D-pad, your bumpers, A, B.
And then you had to physically move your hand into a different position to have that second C-stick, and because for them, that was like such a special new thing.
It's the stick and the Z button. It was like a whole different play style. And that's why, I mean, you notice, most people are like, oh, that's so stupid. You got to move your left hand back and forth. You don't. Most games pick one or the other.
Yep.
And I've come to appreciate the N64 controller. But we're running close on time here, so let's try to burn through these worlds real quick. There's Mumbo's Mountain. This is your Bob-omb Battlefield, your Green Hills zone.
Great place.
First level, you meet Mumbo. He turns you into a termite, and you get to climb up some stuff.
Let's go through each level, and we'll both just give a little impression about that.
Yeah,
and I will say the last couple levels, I did not.
Yeah, there's two levels. There's two levels I was just trying to get done. So I'm not going to have much to say about those. But with Mumbo's Mountain, I thought it was a great first level. Very simple, but very enjoyable. And this is the one I could see a little kid having a lot of fun running around in. Not too many enemies, except for that one bull annoyed the crap out of me.
Yeah.
That's about that. I love Conga as well, the guy that throws the oranges at you.
Oh, yes.
But yeah, that's my impressions on Mumbo Mountain.
About the same thing. It's a great world. I love it. It was challenging for me to get up the ant tower, though, even as the ant. I spent way too long just trying to climb it before remembering that you have to turn into an ant to do that.
You're trying to use the Talon Trot, and it's just not working.
Because it lets you go up the first thing.
Yeah, and then it tells you no. And even with the termite, you have to jump from like the higher part to the lower part of the next platform. It's a little funky. Moving on from there, we had to Treasure Trove Cove, which is a pirate beach world.
Yeah.
Took inspiration. Well, Billy Hatcher took inspiration from this, I suppose. But it's the second world, and it's pirates on a beach. I think this one's also well designed. It feels a little more sectioned off than Mumbo's Mountain, where you can get that good overview shot. But I still enjoyed it. I think it is well designed. The enemies are a lot more interesting here.
What was the name of the boss?
The boss? You mean the guy with the treasure? Or are you talking about the big crab?
The big crab.
I think his name was Nibbler. No, that's Futurama.
Nipper?
Nipper, that's
Nipper,
it.
yeah. Nipper was great.
Speaking of, this show is brought to you by Matt Groening. Check out his shows. He's been around for like 40 years now. But yeah, you meet Captain Blubber. He's an NPC. You find his gold in his sunken ship. It's just fun to run around in. They shoehorn the flying in. It's not really necessary. I didn't feel like there was much they got out of it in this one, but it's there nonetheless.
Yep.
It's fun to platform. Do you have any thoughts on Treasure Trove Cove real quick?
Treasure Trove Cove had some fun vibes.
Treasure Trove Chobe.
Trevor Jim Your Mom. It was alright.
It's alright. Next we have Clunker's Cavern, and this is a steampunk water level.
As far as water levels go, not bad.
That's what I was gonna say. I saw it was a water level, and I'm like, oh, this is gonna be miserable. But it plays well. A lot of swimming, which I didn't like because I don't like the swimming, but it's not like obtrusive and obnoxious. I love the fact that you can go inside Clanker, Clanker, and the way that you find some of these jiggies is really creative. You have to use his body in different ways to climb on him and go throughout his insides.
And Clanker is Gruntilda's garbage disposal.
I think that's the lore there. But I enjoyed this level for a water level. It's not my favorite. If I was ranking them, I think this would be towards the bottom, but not at the bottom. Same thing.
Yeah.
Next, we move on to Bubble Gloop Swamp.
First thing I noticed, I'll be honest, is the look and vibe of it was very similar to Clanker's Cavern. I think N64 had that texturing problem where sometimes sometimes things just ended up looking bleh. And I think both levels did that a little bit with their textures.
Yeah, with the swamp, I will say the toxic water annoyed me, and I didn't find the wading boots quick enough. And Mumbo turns you into a crocodile here, and I think that's neat because you can bite stuff. And I love the mini games, I guess you would call them here. The one where you have to do like Simon with the turtles and then Hungry Hippos with the crocodile. I really enjoyed those. I think this was well designed, and the way they do the secret areas is nice. The way they do this whole world, I really like the way it's laid out. It's kind of like every section feels distinct, but it's all around one big central area.
Yeah.
And there's the maze. It's really just a pathway that looks kind of like a maze. I really enjoyed everything about this one, though, especially considering the fact that I wasn't thrilled about the wading boots at first. This one's towards the top for me.
Yeah, it was a fun one to get around.
Especially when you get good at the platforming. It's extra satisfying. Next, we have Freeze Easy Peak. It's the snow level.
I gotta be honest, I'm just biased against snow levels. I never like them.
My first note here says snow physics, not overly obnoxious. I think that's bad. Don't just change it slightly, either go all or nothing. And they kind of just slightly give you a little bit of like slide. And it's not enough to be like Link to the Past where it's the ice physics are brutal. But it's just like, why do a little bit when you can do nothing or a lot? And I'm not a fan of that. And it's not even like just certain textures have it. No, every texture has a little bit of slide to it. Unless you're in Kazooie for some reason. I don't think that when you're on the Talon Trot, you get a lot of sliding.
Get better grip with talons.
Yeah, of course. And then you'd get turned into a seal here that doesn't really do much. I didn't like this transformation of them all. I would say I think this was one of the lesser ones. This and the pumpkin. We'll get to that in a little bit. It just basically, with the seal, you can go in the cold water, and then you get into a cave with the big seal. It was an okay level. The flying section here drove me absolutely insane. This was the first time I was really like, okay, why is there flying in this game? It doesn't feel necessary. And the racing minigame with the other polar bear was actually kind of challenging, and I enjoyed that. Nodding his head. Okay. Next, we're moving on to Gobi's Valley, which is the desert level. I'd say this is probably my top.
Yeah?
Top of my list. I really enjoyed Gobi's Valley. there's like a lot of Egyptian imagery here. Like, what do you call the big headpiece thing that they put over their heads? Like a headband that's like a foot taller than their head.
Shoot, I don't know.
I don't know either.
Their helmet.
But there's Banjo statues like wearing the Egyptian headpiece thing. Banjo is the Sphinx. There's quicksand here you can use the wading boots to navigate through. There's a lot of flying, but this is like the most open area you really get to fly in, and it feels kind of nice. The sub areas are really good. There's the matching mini game I enjoyed. I just thought that was pretty cool, and as a kid I would really enjoy that. The enemies are fun. I just liked it. The NPCs are cool. Any other thoughts on Gobi's Valley?
I have thoughts on the next level. That's what I've been waiting on.
I'll let you lead on Mad Monster Mansion.
Dude, Mad Monster Mansion is the best level. I don't care what anybody says. That's my favorite one. I just love the vibes of it. The colors are all wonderful. It's got that spooky purple and green kind of deal going on. I love being able to smash windows and just crawl on in. F stuff up. I was able to deal with the ghosts all right. You just got to be quick and deliberate about what you're doing when you're in some of those rooms. Yeah.
Any thoughts on the pumpkin transformation?
No thoughts.
No thoughts. So this one, I think this might be history. It's the first time we've really disagreed on anything on the podcast. I did not care for this level. I don't think it's particularly bad, but I do think it's on the lower half of my levels. The ghost enemies drove me absolutely insane, especially in the big church when you were trying to get on top of the giant pews, and the ghosts just keep knocking you off when you're trying to backflip. I didn't know you can fly.
Sounds like you just need to get better.
I probably do, but like it was driving me insane because I'm trying to backflip up these things, and the little drove me insane. It was making me so angry, and the pumpkin is just bad. I don't like the pumpkin. But, I mean, other than that, I do agree. It is well designed. It looks really cool. I just wish they took out the ghost and took out the pumpkin. It's the only thing I really didn't like. But yeah, it's a haunted house level. Don't know if you touched on that.
I tend to rate my levels on a metric of how much would I just want to hang out in that world. That's my personal system. So Mad Monster Mansion is way up there.
That's fair. Breaking the windows is really satisfying. I like that. Now these last two
the buildings too.
These last two I don't really have much to say. I don't know if you do.
Nope. It's weird. I feel like going through every level like this just isn't the best way to talk about Banjo-Kazooie. Not to I'm not trashing you. I'm just saying,
I get what
when
you're saying.
Go through the levels individually, they're all like, right, there's ups and downs, but for some reason, when you take it all together, that's when you're like, oh, this is a really good game.
Yeah.
But we'll talk about that more once we get past
We'll kind of just burn through this last stuff then and get into the final section. So there's Rusty Bucket Bay, which is a shipping boat, also kind of looks a lot like Clanker's Cove. I ran low on time. I didn't really get to enjoy it. And then there's Click Clock Woods, which is a big tree level. You get to turn into a bee. The fly trap enemies look really annoying. I didn't really get to deal with them much. I don't have any thoughts on these. I was very short on time and rushed through the last parts. But then you get the last two levels that I do want to touch on because this is like the ending sequence.
Yeah.
You get Grunty's Furnace Fun.
Which I love this. And I love that a lot of the other Banjo games do this too.
I didn't know that. And now I'm excited because I enjoyed this as well.
Yeah, it's so unique. And throughout the whole game, you'll have these moments of breaking the fourth wall, and so it's wonderful to have this final. It feels like the boss at first, but you just have this trivia show, and it's fun that it goes through all the levels and like, I don't know, it's just like, do you even remember what you played?
Luckily, I was taking notes throughout the whole thing, so I had a lot of stuff. But this is a trivia show, board game kind of dealio. You step on the tiles, and it asks you a question or makes you do one of the challenges you've played previously in the game. It looks really well designed. I just love the idea of quiz you on the game while you're still playing the game. There are a couple of other times that this happens in like other video games I can think of, but usually it's just like a mini game or something like that, or like collectibles, or doesn't really make much of a difference.
It's like Gruntilda spent so much time building this tower in these worlds. She's like, you better have remembered what I've done for you.
And the best thing is the different tiles do different things. There's Banjo-Kazooie tiles that are just trivia on the game. The eye tiles show you a screenshot from the game and ask you where it's taken.
And it's always the weirdest little corners,
And
too.
it's like a terrible angle every time, but I still think that's really neat because the areas are distinct enough that you can kind of tell where it is. And it's usually like maybe you'll have it narrowed down to one or two, but usually it's three choices.
Gosh, when it shows a
gonna guess
picture of... There's some pictures where it's like a gritty-looking sewer exit, and it's like that could be 3 or 4 different levels.
But then you look at the questions and it's like, is it Mumbo's Mountain? Is it Gobi Valley? Or is it one of the steampunk levels? It's like, oh, well, obviously, they don't make it too challenging. I mean, this is a kid's game. The writing for a kid's game is pretty good. I would like to talk on that here in a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
Then there's the music note tiles, where she plays an audio clip from either an NPC or one of the world's musics. And you have to guess either who said it or where it's from. That's really cool, because some people just play video games without sound. Like, at that point, you're getting nipped. But I really think that's a cool way to call back here. The stopwatch panels make you do one of the challenges from the game, whether it's like the crocodile mini game, Simon with the turtles, or the boss fight with the box from the ship level. The Grunty tiles ask you a question about Grunty. We're going to touch on the NPCs here in a little bit, but there's an NPC, Bruntilda, who tells you all about her sister Gruntilda.
Yeah.
And she, I don't know, I guess she's not fond of her sister.
We'll get to her. We'll get to it.
But yeah, she asks you a question, you answer that. The skull tiles can be any of the other tiles, but if you fail the challenge or get the question wrong, instant death. The Joker tiles also can be anything else, but you get 2 Joker cards if you succeed, and you can use them to skip anything else. The honeycomb and lives tiles just give you honeycombs or lives. And failing a challenge takes a honeycomb, unless it's one of the instant death ones. And if you die, you have to start over. I had save states and notes, so I didn't have any issues here. But once you beat it, you get the free Tootie.
And you win, right? You win.
They roll the credits here. They roll the credits after this, and they tell you all the characters that have lines throughout the game.
Yeah, can I tell you my experience with the ending here?
Go for it.
I have it's been a long time, but I've beaten the game before, so I went through the emotions of this ending part. Especially when you're younger, it feels, when you beat the board game and you get Tootie back, it feels so final. They run the credits, and then they have this fun little after credit scene where you and your friends with Mumbo, right?
No, that's after the boss. This is where you walk up to Tootie.
No, this is. So you get Tootie, you get her back, and then they run some credits, and then you have a nice little barbecue outside with Bottles and co. And then Tootie walks out and goes, you didn't even beat Gruntilda. She ran away.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, okay. So let me go through the ending then.
I know the ending. I didn't see that.
So you think the game is done. You're like, I did it. And then she says, no, Gruntilda's still alive. And Banjo and Kazooie, they just book it. They immediately run
And they're
away.
wearing their cool sunglasses, too. I'm guessing they do like a kind of Looney Tunes thing where the glasses fall off, or do they keep the glasses on? Because that'd be hilarious.
I just know they run away.
Semantics.
You finally get into Gruntilda's lair, like where all the vats and the
top of
machines
the
are.
fortress. The top of the tower.
And you have your boss battle with her. Now, did you watch the boss
I have
fight?
notes on the final boss fight. Before we do that, with the credits there, after you rescue Tootie, it's the characters are telling you who worked on the game.
Yeah.
And they just have like weird titles, like penny pinchers or whatever, or like the accounts people, I guess. And it was pretty well written. I got a chuckle out of it.
It just shows you how good Rareware's company culture was, especially at the time. Like,
even on the Xbox version, they put in the same stuff, and it's like Xbox penny pinchers. It's like Phil Spencer. That's really enjoyable. But after you go back to face off against Gruntilda, you head to the top of the tower, and you do what looks like a damn good boss fight.
it's a really good boss fight.
I'll let you elaborate more because I didn't actually
Way
get to
better
play.
than Bowser's fight. There's just more. Shoot, how do I best describe it? There's just more you have to do in the boss fight.
There are distinct phases.
There's interesting phases. They mix it up. You're not just throwing her or just hitting her. What sticks out to me the most when I recall the fight is right at the end, where you get to use all the Jinjos. You get to use all the Jinjos that you saved, and that's really satisfying too. That's a really good payoff. There's a few different... Shoot, now I'm trying to remember. There's a couple moments where there's just payoffs like that right at the end, right?
So I'll kind of run you through the whole final boss because I watched somebody else play it on YouTube. Shout out to whoever recorded that and put it on YouTube. But it looks like to start out, Gruntilda on her broom is flying back and forth across the stage trying to hit you. Avoid that. Mm-hmm. And then she flies off the edge of the stage and you get to shoot her with your eggs. Then she starts to shoot fireballs at you.
Yep.
And you have to avoid the fireballs, then shoot her with your eggs. After that, there's a flying section, which seems miserable because I hate the flying. But you have to basically beak blast, beak bomb, whatever it is, into her while she's still shooting fireballs at you.
Yeah.
Looks really cool. For a final boss fight, that seems epic, but I hate the mechanic of flying in this game, so I don't know that I would enjoy it. And then after that, the Jingo statues spawn.
And those, you have to shoot eggs into the base of the statue to awaken them. And then once you send out
all
the
5
first round of
Jingos
them,
or whatever,
you get... They do like a Power Rangers thing and combine into one giant Jinjo.
Do you remember what it's called?
The Jinjonator?
The Jinjonator, the Jinjonator. And it has 4 sides on its base that you have to fill with eggs. Mm-hmm. And then it's a big, like, sky blue Jinjo breaks from the statue. And Gruntilda's like, you haven't beaten me yet? And then she's like, oh shit. And then the giant Jinjonator, or whatever it is, Jinjonator, charges into Gruntilda repeatedly and eventually knocks her off the top of the tower to win the game.
Yep, she falls off, lands, a big rock falls on her.
She tries to get saved.
Upset about it.
Then you go back on the beach with your bikini lady and Kazooie, Tootie, bottles, all that. And all the enemies are listed. I thought that was kind of silly, because they gave them all names that I didn't know they had. It's just like the ghosts are called Teehees, which is just makes me hate them even more.
Oh, can I explain the very end?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so you go through all the enemies, you get their names, and then it cuts back to the beach scene, and Mumbo comes out.
Falls out of the coconut tree.
Yeah, he falls out of the coconut tree.
Just there the whole time.
And I'm guessing if you miss anything, that's when he shows you stuff you missed, right?
Yeah.
But if you complete everything, you will also get these little things that he shows you that you couldn't find before, but now you can. These mystery eggs and an ice key. It's super mysterious. I remember when I was little, my memory goes back to right before the internet was really big. And so when you went on the internet to look up stuff about video games, you would get those. You'd
get game facts where they do the arts with the ASCII.
Just the ASCII art, or it'd be like forums where people are just speculating.
And it's like 8 months apart are the responses.
Yeah, and it's really good. It was a lot of fun having that bit of mystery at the end of Banjo-Kazooie. Very confident of them. They end the game with being like, yeah, there's going to be Banjo-Tooie. But so... there was an interesting system that they had set up with these secret items that ended up not working out. I didn't know this. The system was called Stop and Swap.
And I saw some stuff about this. I didn't get to read into it, so you're teaching me as well as any listeners who also haven't played the game.
Yeah. So what this old system was, where there is these... if you beat the game, then you have a chance to get these special secret items. And once you get these items, if you have Banjo-Tooie, you can pull out the Banjo 1 cartridge, stick the Banjo 2 cartridge in, and you will... Shoot, I forgot what you're supposed to get. You're supposed to get something out of that.
That's really cool.
Yeah, because the Nintendo 64 itself would save some of the memory from Banjo 1, and then when Banjo 2 boots up, it'll be like, oh, you have these items.
That's actually really cool. I didn't know they did that, like, to actually do stuff in-game.
Yeah.
Because in some speedruns on the N64, notably, most notably Paper Mario, there's a trick you can do that's also dubbed by the community called the Stop and Swap, where you get to a certain point in Paper Mario, you pull out Paper Mario, put in Ocarina of Time, speedrun Ocarina of Time using arbitrary code execution to beat the game in a matter of a handful of minutes. Then you pull that out and put Paper Mario back in, and you beat the game instantly, like credits for it. They call it the Paper Mario Stop and Swap, and they beat Paper Mario in like 40 minutes doing it, and it includes the time you spend playing Ocarina of Time. So the fact that name was originated in Banjo-Kazooie, I believe, is... I love that.
Has Summoning Salt done a video on Paper Mario?
I don't think so, not yet.
That would be great.
There are some good videos on the Paper Mario Stop and Swap. If you're interested, you can check it out after this.
But so, that was the original idea. But then, before the second Banjo-Kazooie could come out, they actually updated Nintendo 64's hardware. And so
The
before...
DD? The DD?
Well, no, this was the base N64. It was where if you took out the cartridge, you had about 10 seconds to put the new one in, boot it up, and preserve some of that temporary memory. But with this improvement, that went down to 1 second, and so you physically didn't have time to swap the cartridges and boot it up, because it took more than a second to boot up. So they had to scrap it, which sucks for any kid who played the game and had this
On a newer
super
model
cool
N64.
ending. Yeah, with an ending that tells you, hey, here are some secrets, and it turns out they just don't do anything.
If you have one of the OG N64s though, it might work. Check your serial number.
Wow, yeah. If you have a really old N64, that'd be cool.
Is it still in the game, or did they take it out? Do you know?
I think it's... I don't know if Banjo-Tooie reacts to it at all, because I'm not sure if the game released before or after it broke.
We'll have to see. That's something you can tell us in the comments if you know. We are running a little bit long, but I think that's okay, because there's still a few things I want to touch on, notably the writing, the NPCs, and the music, all of which I think is done phenomenally.
Oh, it's so good.
The writing, this is supposed to be a kid's game. And I've heard Conker's Bad Fur Day has some raunchy writing.
It's not a kid's game.
From the same team. That is not a kid's game. This one can still get some passes at it, but like they mentioned going into the NPCs, Brentilda, Grunty's sister, who you can find throughout the castle, who tells you like embarrassing secrets of Grunty's, tells you like her special talent she does at the talent show is an old witch striptease. I'm like, this is a kid's game, and you're talking about an old witch doing a striptease?
I love it. I can't tell people how to raise their kid, but I'm the kind of person where it's like, whatever,
I mean, that's not like a big deal. Like, I'm not like, oh my god, why isn't this rated M? Like,
I think it's so funny.
I just thought it was like, it's like those SpongeBob innuendo jokes.
Yeah,
except it's not innuendo, it's just right in your face.
At the end of the game, too, I think it's Banjo who says that he needs a drink.
I love that. And I mean, just a lot of the other writing, like the exchanges between Kazooie and Bottles, they have like a friendly...
sarcastic.
Yeah, they hate each other, and it's funny, because Kazooie calls Bottles like goggles or like mole brain. No, bird brain is the other way around.
Bird brain is what goggles calls
Yeah, and there's a lot of quick quips that are pretty well written, and I was surprised. I think the writing still holds up really well. Seems a little cheesy at times, but it's nothing like, oh my god, why is this so cheesy? It's just like, it's pretty good.
I wonder if games were just more sarcastic back then, or like less afraid to hurt the feelings of its player, because Animal Crossing was that way too.
On the N64, yeah, on GameCube.
Like, they can be straight up rude to you.
Or like on the 3DS version, I never actually played it, but I've heard people talk about it. The way Rossetti works. If you close your 3DS and open it back up.
Oh, yeah.
It like yells at you.
Well, Resetti was nerfed on the 3DS, because I've played all the Animal Crossings. Old school GameCube Animal Crossing, he made me cry as a kid. Because you would... Sometimes, like, the power would go out or something, and you just have to turn your GameCube back on. And with the 3DS, you had an out. He would ask you, did you turn the game off, or did you run out of battery? And if you say out of battery, he just, okay, whatever. But on the GameCube, no question. He would just start yelling at you off the cuff. Anyways, that's not even Banjo.
That's a Rossetti tangent. But yeah. And that's another thing. They broke the fourth wall very often, and it never felt, like, tasteless. Would you agree?
Oh, I would agree totally. The whole game, the whole writing is saturated in fourth wall breaking, sometimes satire. There's a lot of moments. Billy Hatcher was a little bit like that too, where
it wasn't as blatant by any means.
No, but very aware that it's a video game, and they're just gonna totally play with the scenarios.
It's not taking itself too serious.
Yeah, it'll get ridiculous, and it's funny.
And I mean, the writing goes hand in hand with the NPCs, who are all well-written characters.
Love them all.
Especially Brentilda, who tells you, like, oh, she has slug jelly on her toast.
Brentilda is so funny to me. Brentilda? You first meet her, and she's like, I'm the good witch. And then she only gossips with you, talking shit about her sister.
She talks her sister, and it's all... It's just, like, the stuff they come up with, it's like, that's just, like... gross. Like, she eats slug toast, and I can't even think of more examples. There's so many.
That's just 90s gross out humor.
Yeah, I mean, it works. It's never like, I'm gonna go throw up now. But yeah,
I love it.
it's all well written. I mean, Captain Blubber is a pirate, and he acts like a pirate. And some of the enemies that speak are well written as well, like Nipper.
Mumbo has just always been my favorite.
Mumbo is. I love Mumbo's audio. I wish I could do it justice, but with my throat hurting, I'm not even gonna try.
He shows up in later games too. Oh, I want to talk about that too. Rareware, just they make great games overall. One of my favorite games growing up, one I sunk a ton of time into, was Viva Pinata.
I've heard a lot about that.
Yeah, and I played it before Banjo-Kazooie, so it was really cool as a kid to play Banjo-Kazooie for the first time and then find out all these references in later Rareware games were from that game. I keep saying Rareware. I feel like I can just say Rare.
Yeah, but Rareware is fun to say. Rareware, Can't do it.
I'm gonna comment that now.
Rareware.
Rareware.
Yeah, if you're still watching and you haven't commented already or don't have anything clever to say, just comment Rareware.
Now I'll comment it and you can like that comment.
I probably will. Last thing I want to touch on before we get out of here is the music.
Oh, it's so good.
It is very good.
It's Grant Kirkhope, one of the best video game composers of all time. At least of our time.
He makes music.
He does. Oh, it's so good. You got to find some videos of him. There's videos where he will just make music on the fly. He'll have a kazoo, some other instruments, and he'll play them all at the same time. The guy is just pure talent. All of his games are just good music. Banjo-Kazooie included in that. One thing interesting about him is, off the top of my head, I don't know if there's many Grant Kirkhope melodies that I could just belt out. Maybe some of you older guys might be able to, who really grew up with the N64. But for me, his music is more of a vibe. Like, I can hear his music and instantly recognize that is Grant Kirkhope.
That's cool. I'm not going to speak like I know anything about this, because I don't. I just know that I love the music in this game. Especially, like, the final boss theme's very, like, epic, and there are a couple standout tunes that I just really enjoyed. The music is so good.
It's whimsical to the max.
Oh, yeah. And it's never, like sometimes you'll have a game where it's like, yeah, the music's good, but when you're in the same sandbox for 45 minutes to an hour, it gets annoying after a little while. I never had this music fatigue at all. Everything I just enjoyed thoroughly. I loved it. It's fun stuff.
I have one more interesting thing to say about the game. I had these weird, surreal moments where I'd play and I'd be maybe somewhere high up and I'd look around, and suddenly the whole stage would feel very liminal. A lot of the stages, when you kind of look out beyond the horizon, right away you just see that you're actually in this big box with stuff in it. It's the same vibe as those indoor playgrounds that have the fake plastic trees and logs for you to run around. Do you remember those?
The McDonald's Play Place?
Yeah, stuff like that.
I thoroughly remember the McDonald's. I remember a friend having a birthday party at a Burger King, and they were doing Pokemon cards for Gen 4. I was like 7. Good time.
Oh, yeah. But that's kind of the vibe the levels would give me sometimes. In it, do you know what liminal is? You've heard that word, right?
I've heard the word. I couldn't tell you what it means.
It's like, there's a few different definitions. I think there's a right one, and then there's one that people tend to take. My take on it is that it's those very... it's not even creepy, just this weird specific feeling of those in-between places that aren't...
Oh, I'm in purgatory kind of thing?
Yeah, like between shops in a mall, especially if no one is there. That really amps it up. When a place is empty that should have people, that's super liminal.
I will say, though, like you're saying, these high up areas, I didn't notice that at all. I mean, I'm sure it's there. I believe you. I'm not trying to say that you're wrong. I just enjoyed looking out over the stages and really getting a grasp of it, going to the first person camera and just being like, kind of getting an idea of where I've been, and it's really neat. It's my biggest gripe with the level design of Billy Hatcher. I loved it here. Yeah,
you get to actually see the level.
All right. Anything else you're just dying to get off your chest here?
No, I love this game.
This is this game good. And to answer the question I'm going to pose, this game is very much timeless, but it is bogged down by a little bit of N64 clunk. And if you have the patience to get past N64 clunk, you've probably already played it. If you haven't, though, you should. It's a great experience. And even if you have played it, why not go back and do it again? It's fun.
Here's my suggestions. I know I trashed the Xbox version earlier. I just hate what Microsoft did with Rare. But if you have an Xbox, it's more accessible. I
It's
find
still
that
on Live Arcade and all that other stuff, or Game
it's
Pass.
easier to play too because it's got the Xbox controllers and the cameras are a bit fixed up. But if you're really interested in playing a collectathon, I really suggest Ukulele. It's just modern Banjo-Kazooie made by the same team. Grant Kirkhope does the music again. It feels authentic and it plays really nice.
All right. Well, that'll wrap up this episode of the Analog Sticks podcast. Thank you all very much for listening. If you haven't already and you weren't listening when I told you the first 2 times, like, subscribe, rate, review, follow, whatever it may be, whatever platform you're on. Either way, we appreciate you, and we will see you next week on the Analog Sticks podcast. Bye-bye.
See ya.